Imagine a job interview where, within the first few minutes, the person across from you judges instead of listens and dismisses instead of trying to understand. That was exactly my experience. I just went through the worst job interview of my life, and I feel genuinely humiliated. For context, I am a 26-year-old woman currently working as an assistant in the reception sector. I had applied to several remote positions, and a new startup based in Hong Kong reached out to schedule an interview via Zoom. Since the interview was during my working hours and I don't have a private room, my only option was to go to a cafe during my lunch break. As soon as the interview started, the interviewer came across as extremely cold and rude. Without any introduction, they jumped straight into questions and even cut me off while I was introducing myself. They complained about background noise, even though I had already explained my situation beforehand. There wasn't even any music playing, and I was the only customer in the cafe. Their expression grew even more displeased as they continued asking about my salary and my current role. However, it was clear they weren't really listening, just asking questions out of formality. About 5 minutes in, they asked if I had any questions. I still tried to remain polite and said I wanted to learn more about the company and the team. They gave me a very brief 15-second explanation of the position, and I can't even find the job listing anymore. They then asked if I had anything else to ask. I answered honestly and said I would like more information about the company. It seemed like they had no intention of elaborating. Instead, they started telling me that I was being rude, that there were hundreds of better candidates, and that I was wasting their time. They also added that my interview setup or environment was not their concern. Of course, I understand that I could have been better prepared, but I believe that showing basic respect to a candidate who takes the time to attend an interview costs nothing. Honestly, this was the shortest and coldest interview I've ever had. I've never encountered someone so disrespectful, and it makes me wonder how they treat their employees. At least I know this wasn't a long-term loss for me. Still, I wish I could get that time back.
Although this experience may appear to be just a brief job interview, the person who went through it experienced an intense emotional trigger. The dismissive and distant attitude they were exposed to did not only create momentary discomfort, it also activated deeper feelings of worthlessness, inadequacy, and invisibility. Being interrupted, not feeling heard, and being directly criticized led to a temporary disruption in their sense of self. Such experiences can lay the groundwork for cognitive distortions like "I'm not good enough" or "no matter what I do, I won't be appreciated," even though the situation objectively stems from the other person's unprofessional behavior. The individual may still tend to internalize it. This creates a complex emotional state where shame, anger, and disappointment intertwine. In the healing process, reframing the experience plays a critical role. The individual needs to evaluate the situation not as proof of their own inadequacy, but as a reflection of the other party's lack of communication, skills, and empathy. This kind of cognitive restructuring helps reduce the emotional burden. At the same time, it is important for the person to realize that this experience does not define their worth. For the traumatic impact to decrease, emotions should not be suppressed but processed. When the person acknowledges and expresses feelings such as shame and anger, their intensity gradually diminishes. Writing, talking, or sharing the experience in a safe environment contributes to a healthier recovery process. Over time, the individual can transform this experience into a learning opportunity, creating more controlled environments for future interviews, developing boundary-setting skills, and recognizing problematic attitudes earlier are all part of this growth. However, it is essential not to place all the responsibility on oneself. Knowing how to respond in such situations is also a key part of recovery. First, when the person notices that the other party is crossing boundaries, they can address it in a calm but assertive way. For example, instead of withdrawing when interrupted, saying something like, "May I finish my sentence?" helps maintain self-respect while setting communication boundaries. If the behavior continues, ending the interview is also a healthy option because no job opportunity should come at the expense of psychological well-being. Additionally, after such an experience, the person should avoid self-blame and instead evaluate the situation objectively. Interviews like this can provide important clues about the company's culture. In that sense, the experience can also be seen as an early opportunity to avoid the wrong environment. In conclusion, although this incident may feel hurtful and unsettling in the short term, when processed correctly, it can become an experience that strengthens self-awareness and psychological resilience. Through this process, the individual learns to rebuild their sense of worth independently of external evaluations. If you'd like to follow more psychological analyses of real-life experiences and deep dives into human behavior, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming content.